Hello, and welcome to another Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. I am Brenda with AARP. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to more than 100 million Americans 50 plus and their families: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. AARP also produces the nation's largest circulation publications, the AARP Magazine and AARP Bulletin. To learn more, please visit aarp.org/about-AARP. In the month of June, AARP offers events and enriching experiences close to home and from your home that help you make connections and serve others. While our situations are different, our need for connection is universal. Now more than ever, we know that connecting with family and friends is vital to aging well and living longer and happier lives. Visit us at aarp.org/local for more information. Thank you again, and with that, I'll turn it over to Marshall.
Ladies and gentlemen, non-blind every folk, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Well, hello and good evening. I want to welcome you all to Arizona History Happy Hour. I am so happy you can be here and joining us on July 20th. Have we got a great show for you this evening? Oh my gosh. Now, I know people are watching on, we've got Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch. So, you can also go back and watch other episodes on YouTube because they're all archived there. So you can go back and watch episodes if you've missed one or two. So today is July 20th. And so, a lot happened. So back in 1920, we think gas shortages are kind of I don't say recent thing, but you pull up to the gas station, you see the yellow bag over the thing, and go pull up to the next one. Well, back in 1920, they were having a gasoline famine across the country, and it hit Arizona. And it was even said that there was warnings that you shouldn't leave without 20 extra gallons of gas with you, just in case, to get you to the very next place. And indeed, Ryan, I hope everyone is staying cool because it's been a scorcher out there. Oh my gosh. But you can also stay cool with a lollipop because today is National Lollipop Day. Now, whether you call them lollipop suckers, lollies, whatever, you can lick them, you can bite them. How many I guess that was how many licks it takes you to the center of a Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop? It's 3, in case anybody was wondering. And no, I'm not going to play that commercial. I don't know if I could. I don't even know if I could. But I mean, basically they're fruit flavors. Basically, it's sugar, water, and corn syrup hardened on a stick. And, speaking of things hanging on a stick, the state fair is coming up in October. So when weather cools down, you'll be able to get all kinds of things on a stick there at the fair. It is also International Moon Day. Now, that is not only because back in 1969, we had a moon landing, but, I think it holds particular importance here in Arizona because every astronaut who has walked on the moon, has trained up near Flagstaff, which I think is pretty cool. It is also International Chess Day, where people across the globe have been celebrating their favorite game, chess, which, I used to play. I haven't played it in a while, but that actually came from a UNESCO, or the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They decided that we should have a chess day. And, if you need a little fortune telling in your life, don't run out right now to a Chinese restaurant. But after the show, run out to a Chinese restaurant because today is National Fortune Cookie Day. And, here in the U.S., they go through about 3 billion fortune cookies a year. And it's only an American thing. You know, it's like folks in Asia are like, what are these things called fortune cookies? We don't have them. But if you're in San Francisco, you can actually go to the factories and watch them being made. And they always have a little strip of paper, which may have a language lesson for you, may have a little quip, may even have something that's pertinent to how your day is going. A nice little pick-me-up, or, hey, you know, remember. So today you can celebrate National Fortune Cookie Day. Now, what can you expect from today's show? Well, you know, we've got a little bit of trivia coming up. We've got some Arizona music history coming up, as well as Little Arizona, and of course, a beverage and a super special guest. I'm so excited. Just you wait. So if this is your first time watching, you might wonder, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore, and I got here about 23 years ago from Brooklyn. I was working and living there, working in a beautiful Carnegie building, where I traded that building as well as the snow and slush that went with it for sunshine and a little library in South Phoenix that had this rich oral tradition of the community. And so I started learning about Arizona through stories of others. And that's still what I do today, is I get to learn about stories and just share those stories around. Now, we promptly moved into a 1956 ranch. When we moved here, it was lots of beiges on the outside. I'm happy to say now it is just two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. And there's what my kitchen looks like today. It's a bit of a time capsule, very much a throwback to 1956 with all that tile as well as the matching appliances. You know, as soon as we got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I knew that wasn't true, because every time I went somewhere, whether it was on a bike, at a car, on a bus, on a scooter, you name it, I kept running across so many amazing people, places, and stories. And so I also have the moniker, the Hip Historian, which means I get to play with Arizona history. And so some of the things, next week, I'm actually out in Sun City on the 25th. We are going to be talking about Arizona movies, Westerns, and more. The end of next month, we are going to be doing, I think it's our 5th or 6th. I should actually go back and take a look at the dates, because we took a break for COVID, but celebrating Banned Book Week. And I'm so excited because next year, that's right, 2024, January 5th and 6th, we are going to be celebrating 95 years of the Orpheum Theater in downtown Phoenix with Arizona Unzipped, an educational burlesque show. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. We've already started planning, and we've got some surprises for you all. So be sure to put those dates in your calendar. Now, I see some of you folks have found the chat. If you want to throw me a note after the show, and you can always reach me through Facebook, Instagram, email, or even my website, all Hip Historian related. So you can track me down that way, because I love to hear from you all. So as we get ready to talk about Arizona History Happy Hour, we're going to talk a little bit about Little Arizona. So we're going to talk about I guess we're doing a cocktail. You know, I keep flipping them back and forth. And so, all right. So today our topic is earthquakes. And so PJ came up with a Manzanita shake. One of the things I love about tonight's topic is everybody has a tremor, an earthquake story. And so his is back in the late 90s. He was at ASU in Manzanita Hall when there was the building wobbled back and forth. And so hence he made the Manzanita shake, which is a mango tahini milkshake with Santan Spirit Sacred Stave single malt whiskey. Oh my gosh. So it's a little boozy milkshake. Indeed, that is a boozy milkshake. Well, there you go. All right. So now we're going to talk about St. John's, which is the seat of Apache County, has a population of just under 3,500, and was founded back in the 1880. Now, originally it was called El Vadito, which is Little River Crossing. back in 1870s. And then there was a trader rolling through town called Solomon Barth, and he won enough land and cattle from locals in a poker game to move him and his brothers. And that's when they called it San Juan, which then became Anglified to St. John's back in early 1890s. Now it has been occupied by indigenous communities, and you can see some of the things they've left behind, and you can go tour the Casa. Oh crap! But I was gonna remember how to say this. Casa Malpice. There's a park there where you can go through some of the buildings, some of the ruins that have been left behind, which is kind of cool. Now, it is also known because Placius, which is a kind of a modern, an old hippopotamus. We'll just say that. It's like 200 million years old hippopotamus. And they found 40 of them out near here. And so that's become quite famous. And so you can take and learn a lot about the different communities that lived up there. The Apache, the Hopi, the Navajo, the Zuni, the Hispanic community, the Mormon settlers. A little bit of everybody has flowed through this small town. So take a look, stop through, and learn about some history. All right. Well, now is the time when I get to bring on another voice. So you get to hear from someone other than just me. And I think that's when all the fun really happened. Hello, Mary.
Hello.
Oh
Great
my gosh.
Here.
I am so happy you are here. I mean, as a Tucson native, I mean, you've been writing for 20 years in a variety of local, national, international magazines, everything from Santa Cruz River Dragonflies to Philadelphia politics, and even riding your bicycle through Barcelona.
That's right.
So all kinds of cool stuff, as well as True West published an article you did on basically on earthquakes, and that turned into a book.
Yeah, I am so excited because just yesterday I was talking to an editor at the University of Nebraska Press, Bison Books, and they're interested in publishing my book. And so I'm talking with them about it, trying to figure out how it's going to happen. And so this is very timely, and I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh. Every time I bring it up, it's like people just keep chatting and chatting and chatting. So I am so excited to be kind of tackling this topic. So thank you so much. Now, our trivia is a little different than if you're used to bar trivia. It's like we go through all the trivia, which is multiple choice. So if you don't know the answer, you can easily guess. And, at the end, we're going to go through and talk about the answers. So it's not just we care what the answer is, but the story behind the answer. And for me, I think that's where all the magic really happens. So, all right. So you can keep track of this either in the chat. Some folks do. Anita has a special notebook she uses. There's all kinds of ways people keep track of trivia. And, I say we get started because what a fun topic we have. I can hardly wait. You're going to be shocked by some of these answers. All right. So, first question. A 7.4 earthquake in Mexico caused damage in Arizona in what year? Was it A, 1927, B, 1907, C, 1897, or D, 1887? So I know that was a long time ago, but there was an earthquake in Mexico that caused a lot of damage right here in Arizona. Pick one of those years. All right, so how many people died in Mexico during that earthquake? Was it A, 51, B, 501, C, 1, or D, 101? So how many people do you think died in that Mexican earthquake? All right, so question 3. Who received a horse from Mexican President Diaz for his help assisting earthquake victims in Sonora? Was it A, Jose Aguilera, B, Wyatt Earp, C. Sam Hughes, or D. George Goodfellow? Which one of those gentlemen do you think received a horse for their assistance? All right, question 4. Who created the first photographs of an earthquake's rupture? Ooh. Was it A, C.S. Fly? Was it B, Frederick Remington? C, Edward Muybridge? Or D, Matthew Brady? So, which of those gentlemen do you think created the first photographs of an earthquake's rupture? All right. Question 5. The earthquake caused all buildings to collapse at which Arizona ranch? Was it A, the Empire Ranch? Was it B, the Babakomori Ranch? C, the Steam Pump Ranch? Or D, the Slaughter Ranch? So which one of those ranches was decimated by that earthquake? Question 6. In which town did the town hall cupola sway like a mast at sea? Oh, so do you think that was A, Tombstone, B, Prescott, C, Bisbee, or D, Tucson? So which town had their cupola of their hall just swaying to and fro? All right. Question 7. Before this earthquake, what was the largest earthquake felt in the U.S.? Was it A, Charleston, South Carolina, 6.9 magnitude? C, New Madrid, Missouri, 7.5 magnitude? C, Fort Tejon, California, 7.9 magnitude? Or D, San Francisco with a 7.9? All right. Moving on to question 8. What town was saved when the earthquake wiped out malaria pools in the river? Oh, all right. Do you think that was A, Kearney? Was it B, St. David? C, Tubac? Or D, Nogales? So what town was saved by the loss of those malaria pools in the river? All right. Question 9. The walls of the saloon did a two-step and the floor did a shimmy. Oh my gosh. Described the earthquake in which one of these towns? Was it A, Tombstone, B, Charleston, C, Yuma, or D, Tucson? All right. So which one of those towns did a saloon do a little jig? All right. And question 10. As they measured earthquake aftershocks at the epicenter, what was the field seismograph made from? A, a tin can, string, and a stone. B, a beer bottle, string, and a bullet. C, a bucket, fishing line, and a hook. D, a canteen, yarn, and a chicken bone. So, what do you think they used to make that field seismograph? All right. So we are going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break while you lock in your final answers. And so we are going to talk about Arizona, and we're going to talk about Frida Groffe's Valley of the Sun Suite. Now, it was commissioned, so you probably know basically the Grand Canyon Suite was his probably most famous piece. I mean, that was done with a Disney movie that won them an Oscar. He did a little known piece called Valley of the Sun Suite, which actually premiered in 1952, played by students, all high school students. And they felt it was such an honor to get a chance to do the world premiere of this. Then in 57, it was recorded by the ASU Orchestra. It was also the first time in Arizona there had ever been a stereo simulcast. They actually had 2 radio stations, 2 microphones. So you had to tune 2 different radios, and that's how you could listen to it in stereo. And since they did that, they then made a recording of it. And so if you're a collector, you know, this record's really hard to find. There's not that many around, and I always wondered why. And then I reached out to someone, and they said because it was written when it was done, it was pretty much given to dignitaries as well as musicians. So the copy I have was from a violinist who played in the ASU orchestra. In the mid 90s, the Phoenix Symphony did play it again for an anniversary of SRP. So that kind of brought it back to life again. And then a gentleman in California recently did a kind of mastering of it and had students playing it again. So it that milkshake seems to be getting to me. Oh my. So it's also the topic, just because I mean, it's like I love things I know nothing about. And oh my gosh. So yeah, so Freddie Groffe's Valley of the Sun Suite is such an amazing piece. All right. So now we're ready for some answers. Are you ready, Mary?
Ready.
All right. So question 1, a 7-point for earthquake in Mexico caused damage in Arizona in what year?
1887.
Wow.
So if you think about, okay, what was happening in 1887? Well, a few years before, we had the famous gunfight at the OK Corral, and that was in Tombstone. And Tombstone certainly felt the effects of this earthquake. And this map was actually made by one of the people who went and investigated the earthquake. And I'll talk about him a little bit later. And the circles in the middle show the center of the earthquake in Sonora, Mexico, near the town of Bavispe. And that was an intensity of 10. And then as you go further from the earthquake center, you reduces in intensity to 9, 8, 7. And here in Tucson, where I am, it was a 7. So it was still pretty intense. But it also was felt as far away as El Paso, Texas. In Albuquerque, it broke a plate glass window of the First National Bank. And in Mexico City, which is over 1,000 miles away, it rang church bells. So it was an extremely powerful earthquake. And if it happened today, over 20 million people would feel it.
Wow. You know, I didn't realize what those rings on the map meant. That's crazy that it was felt that far.
Yes. And, all over the place, buildings shuddered, horses reared up, people fell off their horses. And no one, fortunately, it was not a very highly populated area, southern Arizona at that time. So there weren't that many people living here. And fortunately, in Arizona, no one died. But I think the next slide will tell us about how many people died in Mexico.
Yeah. All right. So how many people died in Mexico during that earthquake?
51 people died in Mexico, and most of them, 43 of them, were in the town of Bavispe. And this picture was taken about 6 months after the earthquake by the people who went from Tombstone to investigate, the damage to the earthquake. And this picture shows every house in the town collapsed. And at the time, people built houses with adobe brick walls, and then they had the heavy Viga beams over the top, and they just laid the beams on top, and then they laid dirt and branches over the top, and that was their roof. And it was very sturdy, very waterproof, but it's not sturdy when the earth starts to shake and the roof is not attached to the wall. And so all the roofs in town collapsed on the people inside the houses. And it happened at 3 p.m. on May 3rd. And when I interviewed people in this town, and they told stories of their grandparents who said, 3 de la tarde en el 3 de mayo, 3 in the afternoon on the 3rd of May. And this is a picture of the church in Bavispe after the earthquake. It was just total devastation. And what do people do in the heat of the afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? They're napping inside their house. It's,
right.
It's time to rest. So many people were inside the house. That's why it caused so many deaths, and there was many injuries as well.
Wow. That's just amazing. All right. Who received a horse from the Mexican President Diaz for his help in assisting earthquake victims in Sonora?
Well, that was Dr. George Goodfellow. And he was one of the people commissioned by Clarence Dutton from the U.S. Geologic Service. He was commissioned by him to go see what was happening down in Sonora. And Dr. Goodfellow lived in Tombstone, and he was quite a character. He was a boxer in his youth at Annapolis at the Naval Academy, and he also tended to the wounds of the men fighting at the OK Corral. He had published scientific journals. He had an idea about the Gila monster, where people are saying, "Oh, if you get bitten by a Gila monster, you're going to die." And he said, "I don't think so." So how do you think he proved that?
He got bit by a Gila monster.
Exactly. You know the story. He got a Gila monster to bite him, and he got a little bit sick, and he got sore and red and inflamed around his hand where he was bitten. But then he didn't die. So then he wrote it up and got published in a medical journal.
Wow. So he helped dispel all kinds of myths.
Yes. So he was a key person. He was an ideal person to go to Bavispe because he could measure, look at the cliffs, look at the way buildings fell, and determine like how the earthquake had traveled, between Tombstone, what the waves and the damage had done between Tombstone and Bavispe. And then when he got to Bavispe, since he was a medical doctor, he could really help people who were still suffering from injuries from that earthquake. So because he helped so many people, President Diaz gave him a horse named Rocio. And it was, if you think about earthquakes now, if earthquakes happen, in a city, certainly there's plenty of emergency teams that can go help people. There's sniffing dogs. Well, in 1887, there wasn't that. There weren't highways. It took days to get there, weeks to get there from Hermosillo, which was the closest town. And they didn't even know what had happened for a couple of weeks afterwards because news traveled so slowly.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right. So who created the first photographs of an earthquake rupture?
That was C.S. Buck Fly. And he was another man in Tombstone. He had a studio in Tombstone that you can visit, a recreation of it today if you go to Tombstone, called C.S. Fly Photography Studio. And he and his wife had moved to, his wife was named Molly. They moved to Tombstone from San Francisco because it was a boom town, and they knew that there would be plenty of miners making money and they would pay for photographs. So he set up a photograph studio. He also had a boarding house, and he was also involved in the OK Corral shootout because he was right next to it. So one of the men shot at the OK Corral dragged himself into the Fly studio, but the doctor couldn't get to him fast enough, and he died.
Oh.
And the other reason that C.S. Fly was critical to go down to Bavispe is because the year before, 1886, Geronimo surrendered to the U.S. cavalry at Cañón de los Embudos, which was just north of Bavispe. So C.S. Fly knew the territory. He knew the roads. He knew the trails. He knew what the landscape was. And so he latched on to Dr. Goodfellow's expedition and went down. And there he took the first ever photographs of an earthquake rupture. Because, photographs, if you can go back to the photograph, photography was a new thing. People hadn't been going out and taking pictures of natural disasters. And in this photo, you see the white cliff in the middle. That is where the earth has ruptured and it's split. So he took the first ever photographs.
Wow.
And he also took the photograph I showed earlier of damage in the town of Bavispe.
Okay. Wow. Okay, the earthquake caused all buildings to collapse on which Arizona ranch?
Well, that was the John Slaughter Ranch, also known as the San Bernardino Ranch, and it's very close to the border. It's just outside of Douglas. You can still visit it today. And like Bavispe, this ranch was built on alluvial soil, which means it's what used to be the riverbed. It's not compact, and so when the ground started shaking, the soil just turned. It was like a liquid. So there was nothing to hold up the wall. So every single building at the Slaughter Ranch collapsed. And they were some of the best built, as someone said, they were who was interviewed at the time, they were some of the best built buildings in the area because he was a rich rancher. And fortunately, no one was inside the buildings at the time. And so, but a man had to go to Tucson to find people to come back to the Slaughter Ranch and rebuild it.
Wow, I didn't realize the buildings that are there have all been rebuilt.
Well, they were rebuilt in the 1890s.
Right. So
and then they probably have been restored since then.
Right.
But the original buildings are not there.
Wow. All right, which town did the town hall cupola sway like the mast at sea?
Well, that was Tucson, Arizona. There was a lot of reporting about this in the local newspapers, and I just wanted to read you what they said about Tucson. First, there was the Catalina Mountains that are just outside of Tucson. They said that a big rock formation that used to be called the Old Castle was no longer there. It had fallen down. There were dust clouds from all over the mountains. And so then people were like, oh, there's new places. There's rocks that have opened up. What should I do there? Well, I should go find gold. So there was a gold stampede into the Catalina Mountains. And but there wasn't any gold, sadly for them. But what was happening in Tucson, downtown, one newspaper said no less than 6 persons have been reported laboring under fits of insanity, all of whom have been affected since the disturbance of this section of Mother Earth. So people were going a little crazy, apparently, and a lot of people were out in the street getting sick because it was like being seasick because the ground was moving so much.
Oh, that's crazy that there was that much movement that people were getting seasick from it.
Well, yeah, and it was still an intensity level of 7, which is pretty high, considering how far it was from here,
right,
from Tucson. And so, they said chimneys tumbled, adobe walls cracked, dishes fell from the cupboards, just like today when we see an earthquake video on television or on YouTube, they show everything shaking. Well, that's not news. I mean, that's what happened during an earthquake, and that happened 100 years ago too.
All right. So before this earthquake, what was the largest earthquake felt in the U.S.?
That was in Fort Tejon, California, and it was a 7.9. And the reason it was massive because it was right. You see the star on this map marks it, and the green line is the San Andreas Fault, which is a very famous fault, causes many earthquakes in Southern California. But I also want to mention that the other earthquakes on that slide, they were also very powerful earthquakes. The New Madrid earthquake in Missouri was in 1812, and it was a 7.4. It was like almost a 7.4 earthquake. The Charleston earthquake was in 1886. That was another over 7.1 earthquake, and 60 people died in Charleston in 1886. So that was right before this event. And so the U.S. Geological Society they had studied the Charleston event, but that's why they had to ask someone who was out west, Dr. Goodfellow, to go and study this event because they knew it was pretty serious.
Wow.
And these aren't places you normally think of earthquakes happening in the United States. South Carolina, New Madrid, Missouri, Arizona, but there are these faults that will rupture, every 9 or 10,000 years, and so they just happen to be when, where we knew about them here in the last couple hundred years in the United States and Mexico.
Wow. All right. So, and then I love this one. What town was saved when the earthquake wiped out the malaria pools in the river?
Well, that was St. David, Arizona, which is just north of Tombstone. And it had been settled by Mormons just a year or two before. And so in 1885, 1886, the water in the San Pedro flowed very slowly, and there were also pools where kind of swampy areas where mosquitoes were breeding and people were getting malaria from it. This happened in other places in Arizona too. It happened here in Tucson at Fort Lowell, which was in Tucson. It happened at other cavalry and army posts across Arizona if the water wasn't flowing, which sometimes it's not in Arizona. So the Mormon community were begging the leaders in Salt Lake City. They're like, can we please move somewhere else because we're all getting very sick here. So in 1886, the bishop from Salt Lake sent a man named Apostle Erastus Snow to St. David. And he traveled by horse from central Arizona there. And when he got there, there was no one to meet him. And he said, well, this is, great. How come no one's outside? And they couldn't come outside because they were all too sick from malaria. And so, but he gathered them together anyway. People came out of their houses. Some of them were on mattresses because they couldn't get up. And he spoke to them and he said that a year from now, many saints will populate this valley. And saints is the word for the Mormon community. So they were inspired and they felt better. This was all written down in letters. So they're like, okay, we're going to stay here. And they were making money there because they had a timber business. They were, Tombstone was booming. They were going to the mountains, cutting down trees, making lumber, taking it to Tombstone. They were also making money ferrying people from the railroad station in Benson down to Tombstone. So it was economically, it was a good place, but health-wise, it was horrible. So the next year, 1887, when the earthquake happened, the kids were fortunately outside of the school on the playground because the part of the building where the school was collapsed, and everyone was very scared. But then the San Pedro River surged, and it went from, as a Tombstone newspaper said, a creek wide enough to jump across to a wide river. So the malarial pools were wiped out, and the town was saved. They recovered from malaria, and they didn't get malaria after that.
Wow. There you go. Saved by an earthquake. All right. The walls of the saloon did a two-step and the floor did a shimmy. Describe the earthquake in what town?
This was in Charleston, Arizona, which was very close to Tombstone. And there had been a mill in Charleston to process ore from the Tombstone mines. But even by 1887, the Tombstone mines, their production was low because the mines had been flooded, in previous years. And so Charleston was kind of a town on its way out. It was not many people lived there. And in Tombstone, there was a professional class. There were doctors, lawyers. There was an opera. So they were trying to kind of clean things up in Tombstone. So if you wanted to get rowdy, you had to go down the road to Charleston. So the rowdy guys are in Charleston, and this is what they described in the saloon. But after that, Charleston, the buildings were so damaged that everything closed after the earthquake in Charleston. And this picture, you think, oh, someone must have taken it, 20 years ago or 50 years ago. This was taken by C.S. Fly in 1888. So just 1 year after the earthquake, you can see it already looks like a ghost town.
Yeah, no, I was kind of shocked because I'd never heard of the town. I was like, oh my gosh. So that's amazing. That you're right. I mean, in that photo, it does look like a ghost town because you can see right through some of those buildings.
Right. And that was only a year after the earthquake. So it was already in pretty bad shape. And the earthquake definitely ended the life of that town.
Wow. All right. As they measured the earthquake aftershock at the epicenter, what was the field seismograph made from?
Well, Dr. Goodfellow was very enterprising, and he created his own field seismograph out of a beer bottle, a string, and a bullet. So the bullet would hang from the string that was tied to the top of the bottle, and he watched the motion of whenever there was an aftershock, he would watch the motion of the bullet and determine from which way the aftershock was coming. So was it coming from? And that's how they found the epicenter.
Oh, okay. Wow. But yeah, no, he would have had all those things in so many towns.
Right. And this map is one that Dr. Goodfellow drew of the fault, because he also measured the fault when he was there. And this was published in Science Magazine or Science Journal in 1888.
Wow. That's fascinating. So, Mary, how did you become so interested in earthquakes?
Well, I was working for a local government here in Southern Arizona, and I was a communications person, and I was on a team to advise the public about West Nile virus. And we went to a committee meeting, and someone from the state public health office was talking to us on a speakerphone. This was in the days before everyone was Zooming. And he said, well, malaria he was connecting West Nile virus to malaria, another mosquito-borne disease. And he said that a lot of places in Arizona had a malaria problem. And he mentioned Fort Lowell here in Tucson. He mentioned other Army camps. And he said, and St. David, Arizona also had a terrible malaria problem until the earthquake happened and the San Pedro River surged and wiped out the malaria pools. And I was like, okay, can we just focus on what you just said? Because I had never heard of this. But then I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I went to high school here in Tucson at Catalina High School, which is in the middle of the city. It was built in the 1950s, and we actually had in the hallways what we called earthquake bands, and they were pieces of metal built in the floor. So if the building shook, it would be able to flex but not collapse. And that's because we're in an earthquake zone. We're not in a seismic zone like California, but buildings do have to meet certain earthquake standards throughout Arizona.
Wow. Had no idea.
Yeah. That's how I first got interested. But the most, if you want to know, okay, are earthquakes going to happen soon or not? Some earthquakes, we actually felt here in Tucson about 7 years ago, we felt an earthquake it was Easter Sunday. And it was very, very minor, like, the shade in your window moved a little bit. And that was actually an aftershock from the 1887 earthquake. So the 1887 earthquake was so powerful that aftershocks are continuing today. And they're very minor, but even in Bavispe, I visited there, and I visited the town hall there, and there were cracks in the walls because they get shaken every now and then from aftershocks. But the places that have in the state of Arizona that are most seismically active would be Yuma, because it's close to the San Andreas Fault. So they're going to feel earthquakes from the San Andreas Fault, but also northern Arizona, northwest Arizona, especially the Grand Canyon area. There's some faults there where you might feel shaking every now and then.
Wow, because I can remember being up one night, probably like 2001, 2002, and had a friend visit. So we're like late night chatting, and all of a sudden it felt like a semi drove down our street because the house just kind of rumbled. And it was like, and then it was like, looked out and there was nothing. And it was like, oh, what was that? And then of course, it, like Facebook was like, oh my gosh, that was an aftershock. It was an aftershock. And so, yeah. And I remember that one a few years ago after Easter. It's like, again, it was like, everyone's like, oh my gosh, did you feel that? Did you feel that?
Yeah, well, actually, your experience of hearing a truck go by was similar to Dr. Goodfellow's experience in Tombstone, because he had his office above the Crystal Saloon in Tombstone, and he could see the chandelier shaking in the saloon, and he said it sounded like a train going by. And then when he went outside, he said it was like claps of thunder. It was so loud.
Wow. I mean, and again, and that's something that you really don't associate at all with Arizona is.
Nope. No, you don't. But it's actually how we live in an area, in a geologic area called the basin and range area, where the basins are the valleys and the ranges are the mountains. And that stretches from the Mexican border up through Arizona, Utah, Nebraska. And it was caused over tens of thousands of years by earthquakes, where the earth quakes and the valley drops and the mountains get pushed up.
Oh, I've got, now that you say it, that actually makes sense, because I mean, we've got the white mountains, the black mountains, we've got all these geological formations around Arizona. And you can, I mean, and then like dormant volcanoes, you can still see.
Right. Yeah, this area was very seismically active over the eons.
But not so much anymore, at least for now.
No, not for now. And I actually, before I came on to talk with you this evening, I looked at the Arizona AZGS, and I read about where it is seismically active. What are the chances of an earthquake? And there are certainly faults in the area, but they're not active. So I'm not an expert, but I don't think you really need to worry about earthquakes.
Okay, so I shouldn't be like doing the whole duck and cover thing anytime soon.
Well, we do. There is this. The Great Arizona Shakeout Day is in October, so they do train kids to what do you do in an earthquake? If you can't get outside, get under a table or a desk. But your best bet would be to be outside. Not
oh, I'm going to have to look out for October for
the Great Arizona Shakeout.
Wow. I'm going to write that down, because I'm definitely going to do something for that. Mary, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. And I love how you're in a meeting and somebody mentions one thing, and that's like my days. It's like this little rabbit hole opens up and suddenly you fall down it.
Right. And I've met, I've talked to so many people about it. I've, traveled to Mexico, and I talked to people whose grandparents felt the earthquake in Bavispe. I've talked to scientists who've been investigating it and found they've taken their own photographs of other ruptures in south of Bavispe that people didn't even know about, and that were related to this earthquake. And it's just been a great research project, and I'm excited to finish writing the book and get it published.
So any idea what your next rabbit hole is going to be?
Well, I love to ride my bike around Arizona on dirt roads or on paved roads. So it'll probably be something about exploring Arizona by bicycle.
And there's quite a history of that. I mean, because the whole Good Roads movement started because of bicycles, and then
Right,
got kind of co-opted.
The League of American Wheelmen, as it was called then, they were interested in getting good roads for bicycles, and now it's called the League of American Bicyclists. That same organization is still happening today, but I enjoy riding my bike, and I think I'm actually going to do maybe a little bike tour of the earthquake, where the earthquake affected towns in Arizona, sort of riding the rupture kind of bike tour.
Well, I look forward to following as you ride the rupture.
Okay, I'll keep you posted.
Very good. Well, Mary, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, Marshall. It's been really great to be here.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, how fascinating. And when I realized that I always love to end on how did people do, and I got so into the topic that I completely forgot to say how did everybody do. And thank you, Anita, for being, hey, wait a minute. So yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the fun, is not that how many you got right, but just the stories and how it kind of fits into the whole just Arizona, kind of its history and geology and landscape. So that was so thank you so much for coming on, Mary, and sharing that with us. That was just fascinating. So, all right. So now we're at From the Vault, which is something you might drive by or not know much about. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about biosphere, since we were also doing a little space with the moon day and everything. And so Biosphere 2, which is named that because it was supposed to be a self-contained demonstration of an illogical system. And it was Biosphere 2 because the Earth is the first one. So the Earth is Biosphere 1. This is Biosphere 2. And it really it was used twice, but it kept running into so many issues. It is now owned by U of A, and you can tour through Biosphere 2 and actually get inside, which I think is really cool as well. And look in the background, you see mountains. Those were caused by earthquakes. Now I love, so it's I feel almost like Groucho Marx, where earthquake is suddenly the duck's going to come down and quack, 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 and somebody's going to win something great. But you win just because look at all the great stories you now know about earthquakes in Arizona. Oh my gosh. So cool. So now you'll see why I always say, if you're watching on Facebook, you should share, because we're having so much fun with Arizona history. And so next week we have J Mark, who is going to be talking about the buckhorn baths, which has been getting a lot of interest lately. And then I just saw, and I've already reached out to the Mesa History Museum, because they're going to be putting on a show, an exhibition about the buckhorn as well. So I think it's quite timely to be doing that, as everyone's wondering what's going on. So maybe we'll get an inkling into the future of the buckhorn baths. So if you have any questions, suggestions, stories, please reach out to me, because, I love to hear from you. I mean, Mary said, hey, would you like this as a topic on your show? And I jumped at the chance, because how exciting. So I always want to give a shout out to Chris and Cole, who did that intro video. And of course to PJ for the Manzanita Shake, talking all about, as he had his own kind of stories about surviving an earthquake or an aftershock. Who knows what it was. All right. Well, in ending, we're going to do a little bit of found images from some slides that I used to show around. So have a great evening, and I will see you all next week as we get a chance to talk about the buckhorn baths. Good night and stay cool.